It's take. Good afternoon, everybody. It took us a while to connect to you there, but here we are. It's Friday afternoon. It's heading into the weekend, which means it is another episode of Lessons in Leadership. I'm Mary Gregory. This is episode 37, and I'm absolutely delighted to have with us on this episode the wonderful Janie van Hool. Hello, Janie.
Hello, everyone.
And I get with Janie, you're in the unique position. We haven't had a guest be in this situation before of being in your car while we're talking.
Membry Services, baby, the place to start your Friday.
To start your Friday and move into the weekend. So I hope you're traveling somewhere nice. Anyway, thanks for being so improvising and using the moment to speak to me today. I'm just going to do a quick potted summary of who you are and why I've invited you here today. So, Janie, you and I met long time ago. I dread to think my daughter was just a babe in arms and she's now in her 20s, so that shows it must be a long time ago, when we were both working at the Mind Gym, and I was doing the Mind Gym's training, and you were supported by coming and running a session for us on projecting our voice and projecting our presence and just being able to be great in a room. And I was so impressed by what you did in that session. And then lo and behold, some years later, you know, having worked with lots and lots of different organizations. I mean, you just mentioned earlier, Sainsbury's is someone you've worked with in terms of helping them with their senior leaders with developing inspiring communication, all that sort of stuff. But you now have a book out called The Listening Shift.
I do.
Which is,
yes.
And for everyone watching, this is a really great book. So important to be focusing on our listening. So we're going to talk about that a bit more later. But I want to talk about you first of all, because you are an impressive, you call yourself a leadership advisor and communications specialist, but you're so impressive with what you deliver and the work that you do. So could you tell us a bit more about your journey? Because I know you started off as an actress. How did you get to be who you are today and working with senior leaders in organizations as you do today?
Oh, Mary, it's a bit random. I think in my next life, I'd like to be someone with a very clear path and know how to get where I'm going. But actually, I trained at RADA as a classical theatre actress. And that was, you know, I'd always dreamed of doing that. But it's a funny job, actually. It wasn't the job I expected it to be. And saying someone else's words and being told how to say them by someone else, the director or the producer. And whilst I loved rehearsal, I didn't really love kind of the repetitiveness of performance. So I had a bit of a dark night of the soul when I had my children. I was about 30 at the time. And I took a master's degree in voice because I thought, you know, I do a lot of voice work. I love working with the voice. I'm good at accents and all that stuff. And I saw it as a means of staying in the entertainment industry, but working differently. And then two things happened at the same time. The first was I was invited to do some work in the Bronx in New York with women who were being forced off a state benefit program and sent back into the workplace. And I was invited to do some work with them on how they interview, how they bring presence into an interview, not presents, not gifts. And I found that it was just still remains one of the most important moments of my life. It was wonderful. And then the second one was I met a wonderful woman in Norfolk, and with a bit of alcohol confidence, Mary, I'm embarrassed to say, she turned out to be head of management development for a bank and asked if I would be willing to work with the MD of the bank, because she said he's, you know, a brilliant strategist, but he's not a great communicator. And at the time I was like, I could do that. And so then when she contacted me a couple of days later to follow up, it was too late to say no. But actually I loved it, and I realized I'm much more of a teacher and how valuable those performance skills are in a professional leadership environment, and was blessed with then being passed on by them to business schools and other colleagues and clients. And it's been 22 years of wondrousness, really.
Well, that's incredible. And I'm bowled over by several things that you've just shared there. Firstly, the fact you can do an MSc in voice, that in itself is like, oh, I wouldn't
I
mind
know,
going
right?
and doing that now. That sounds incredible.
I know.
So, you know, the whole thing about how, you know, exploring the voice and how we project ourselves and all of that just sounds so fascinating.
Yeah, it was.
But also that project with the women in the Bronx, just phenomenal.
Oh, Mary, it was so phenomenal because these women were really amazing women, you know, mothers of a lot of children, most of them, and powerful and intelligent women, but just had no inner confidence. But the funny thing was, they were a really difficult audience to win over because, you know, I bought myself a linen suit from Marks and Spencer's, and I stood at the front. There was no air conditioning in June in the Bronx. It was horrendous. And I stood at the front and said, you know, good morning, everyone. My name is Janie. I'm from London in England. And I was, you know, a bit kind of earnest. And they just started talking to each other. Like, they completely blanked me. And in the end, we were just talking about improvisation before we went live. But I took my shoes off and climbed on the table and banged my foot on the table and was like, right, who's a mother in this room? And of course, that silenced them, and loads of women put their hands up. And I was like, right, you're going to do this for your kids. And here's what we're going to do. And it was the first time I realized that actually that the improviser in me, the person who's prepared to go, oh God, I need to change this completely to satisfy this audience. But it was the most rewarding thing because I spent a few days with them, but actually I had an email from one of them some months later to say that she got a job as a paramedic. She got a training program as a paramedic. And it remains one of the proudest moments of my life because I just realized that I could actually help. I could actually make a difference.
And you did make a real difference. And I'm also hearing how much you acted with courage there to get up on the table and stamp your foot and find that access in terms of connecting with people, and your access was connecting over being mothers and what can they do for their children, which is just phenomenal. Really hear that strongly.
I mean, but bless you for saying that. But actually, in my book, I talk about the importance of relevance, and what I've realized from a lot of leaders over the years is that, you know, a lot of the desire to communicate is to tell people what the leaders' priorities are.
Yes.
But actually, you've got to find a way of thinking, what is interesting for these people? How can I make what matters to me relevant to them? And I think we don't give enough time to that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, speaking of your book, of course, let's move on to talk a bit more about that because I'm really excited that your book's only been out 3 weeks and it is. I've been looking through it. I haven't read it fully yet, but I've been looking through it and it's got some fantastic, the whole way you've scoped it out and that you've highlighted people who do listen well and what they do. You use those as case studies in the group, but in the book. But I'm interested, first of all, what you're communications expert. So when I think of communications, I know that listening is a really big part of that. But also I always think of expressing first. It's how I express myself, how I get my point across. And I think that's often what we focus on as human beings. So what caused you to think, actually, the book that I want to write is about listening?
Well, about between 3 and 4 years ago, I trained as a listening volunteer with the Samaritans. And that was really profound for me because I mean, an actor needs to be a listener, right? You've got to be super present. You've got, as an improviser, to be incredibly in the moment. But actually, I realized that no one had ever taught me how to listen. Because I definitely, and I think I say this in the book, you know, you grow up being told to listen, but no one ever tells you how to do it. And when you train as a Samaritan, you know, it's a good 70 hours of input and then continuous ongoing input after that, because some of the conversations we're having are with people who are desperate, you know, and they need to be heard. So I found that really profound. And I thought, it changed me. It changed the way I think about presence, because up until that point, like you say, I'd been helping people think about how to express their ideas. But actually, the people who've probably had the most profound effect on me have been the people who've listened to me. And, you know, one of the reasons I was so excited about this conversation, for me, I don't know about for our listeners, but you're such a great listener. It's so rewarding to be on the receiving end of that. And it started me thinking about leaders, and I just don't see listening in organizations. And Mary, you go on leadership development programs and you might get an hour on listening, the 3 levels of listening: listen to the words, listen to the meaning, but actually it's not helpful. And people always nod and go, yeah, I must listen better. But we don't work at it in the way that we might work at speaking.
Yes, I think there's always an emphasis, isn't there, on how important listening is. But that's as far as it goes quite often. We do lots in terms, even in coaching, it's around asking really good questions, which is another form of expressing, rather than let's focus much more on how you are listening. And another thing I'm curious about in terms of coach training as well, that in my coach training and my further development as a coach, there's a lot of emphasis on your presence.
Yes.
And I personally believe that presence, how present you are, completely tunes into how well you're able to listen.
Yeah.
I just wondered what your thoughts were as a trained actress and someone who's trained in listening, how those two connect together.
I mean, it's the big conundrum, I think, for coaches, because, I mean, forgive me, I don't want to make assumptions about you, but I think a lot of coaches want to help. We go into coaching because, see, I've got this funny bit of hair just sticking up. It's driving me mad. We go into coaching because we want to help. We want to move people forward. We want to solve problems. And I know a lot of leaders are trained to coach their followers in organizations. But that's all, again, about doing. And I think as well, this business of presence is often about how do I use my presence to influence the people that I'm in the room with. But again, that's something about doing. How can I use my experience to influence your experience? And so, I mean, I don't want to be negative, but I think we're not really giving listening training is hard, actually. Listening is hard. It's a bit tedious to keep working at it.
Yes.
And yet we must begin to balance the scales a bit more. We're all speaking up, speaking out, encouraged to talk about our mental well-being issues, encouraged to express issues around inclusion and diversity and equity. We all want to help, but actually there's some roots there that we're not nurturing. And I think a good coach training will really go back to the very basics of that. And
yes. So if someone wanted to improve, if a leader wanted to improve their listening, what would you suggest? What would be a first step they could take?
I mean, this is just going to sound like the most hypocritical thing in the world to say, but what I learned from the Samaritans in particular was we do not give advice. And what I tell other people to do is not to tell people what to do. So I have a bit of an irritation with myself in that conundrum, but actually we must stop listening to solve. Most of the time we are listening to say, you know what you should do is, and that I think is the fundamental route to learning to listen better, is to ask a question that comes from curiosity rather than, I know what I would do. I mean, the solution seems really obvious, but instead of saying it, I'll say, so how do you think you could move yourself forward or something?
Yeah. I totally concur with that, because I do a lot of training programs where I'm supporting leaders develop coaching skills. And I do think it's hard for them to let go of that fix it mentality. They feel like they've got to fix everything because they have been there, done it, got the T-shirt, and letting go. They sometimes feel they're not supporting their people by not suggesting something. So they'll ask a question, and it may even be an open question, but it's still a leading question, like, how about you look at, like, no, that's you're leading, you're still suggesting. So letting go of that can be very challenging.
It's so hard. It's so hard. They get the open question. What would it be like if you took my suggestion? Is so often the driver behind it. I mean, it's so hard. Actually,
it is hard.
It is hard. Great questions is just so hard.
Let go of your own agenda. It can be so difficult. And also, if you're feeling the pressure, which many leaders are in organizations, of we've got to get things done, we've got to find a solution. It's like, I haven't got time to let them find their own solutions. But actually, the whole joy is that if you let people find their own solutions on their own, you're saving yourself time. Ultimately, it's an
You
investment
really
of
are.
your time to do that.
And it's funny, you know, as a Samaritan, of course, we're not allowed to give advice, but often someone will ask for advice. And you know, we're encouraged to say, well, you know, I can't give you advice, but let's explore what you're feeling, or what
Yes.
your options are. And what's very interesting at the end is the number of times people will say, I'm really grateful for your advice. And you think, well, I very intentionally haven't given it, but somehow just being properly listened to, they come round to a place that they're happy to move forward. And those
Yes.
light bulb moments, you can just hear them in the silence.
Yes. Yeah. I concur with that as well. I know as a coach, I get people to go, oh, what you did there was great. And I'm thinking, well, I just listened, actually. I just opened up the space, made it safe, and listened. And that is the key, is to make it a safe space where people feel listened to, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
So you've got me thinking, you know, in my programs going forward, I'm going to spend lots more time on listening than we currently do. So that's really helpful for me.
Good.
So I also want to ask you, because, you know, I believe we're all leaders in life, and we're all leaders in different ways in the world. I see you very much as a leader in terms of the influence you're having over other leaders in organizations, in the work that you do. So I'd like now come to the point of our conversation where I'd like to learn a bit more about a personal lesson that you may have had yourself that kind of might have knocked you for six, might have caused you to catch your breath, but it did get you to step back and consider things from a different perspective, and has moved you forward in terms of how you show up and are in the world and lead in the world, I guess.
Well, it's as I was growing up, my mother had really serious mental health issues, so I actually became an actress, because I remember saying to my dad, I don't think I really want to do this anymore. And he said, if you don't, it'll kill your mother. So I actually went to drama school because I felt like I didn't want to let my mother down. And it was great, don't get me wrong, but my first job was with a small touring theatre company called Cherub. And we went to Iraq and Pakistan. And my contract, which got me into the Actors Union, was acting ASM. So we did 2 plays, one of which I was in, and the other I was ASM, which is assistant stage manager. And the assistant stage manager is the person that does all the backstage costume changes, makes sure the costumes are in perfect condition, organizes all the props, makes sure that the actors are ready and happy to be on stage and give of their best. And I remember once doing the ironing backstage. I fixed a costume and I was pressing it, and I was so happy, Mary. I was in my bliss. And I remember thinking, oh, my mother would be so furious that I'm, you know, in Baghdad doing the ironing. But it made me recognize that what I really love is making other people shine. That's where I feel my leadership sits. And it's difficult because I'm a big personality, and people always go, oh, you're such an actor, you're such a performer. But the truth is, actually, I am at my happiest when I'm enabling the success of others. And that it took me years to get to that place where I realized that that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yes.
And so that's really how I think my leadership shows up. And actually,
yes.
You know, I'm so happy doing that. Really happy doing that.
Yes. So that is a wonderful story, and I love the whole thing about what I'm about is about making other people or enabling other people to shine. So how would that show up in the way you work with somebody, for example? So if you were to work with me, how would you enable me to shine?
Oh, Mary, you do shine. I mean, who could shine?
You don't have to. You don't have to. I know my book's about ego, but you don't have to massage it at the moment.
I think. I mean, if I give you a separate example, actually,
okay.
You know, some of my, in case I get it wrong, some of my work over the years has been with leaders communicating their strategy.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'll work with them over time to craft something that is really powerful as a communication, but then I also help them stand up and deliver it. And sitting in the audience, I feel like there's been some coaches on the Olympics who've, you know, been leaping around with joy when their guys win or gals win. And that's how I feel when I work with someone on something particular and they smash it. Those
Yes.
are the high points for me. And so, you know, for example, if you were speaking about your book, or if you were, you know, standing in front of a big audience, not that you need it, but to work with you on bringing your best self to that and smashing it and loving it. That's the important
Yes.
thing for me, is that,
Yes.
you know, whatever you want to shine in, if you love it, then I'm happy. You know, that's,
Yes.
I get real joy from that, real
So
purpose from that.
do you then therefore tune into people's passions and things that they absolutely love? Is that what you do?
I mean, my job is to help them communicate those things in that way. And not everybody loves, you know, a lot of leaders, for example, that I work with, they don't really love the kind of, now I have to speak to everyone moments. Now I have to be in the media. Now I have to run a you know, an all-person conference or a town hall or whatever you want to call it. You know, a lot of them love the job of doing, but they don't necessarily love the job of being on stage in the spotlight, for want of a better metaphor. So I think it's much easier to talk about the things that you love, actually, than it is
Yes.
to talk about the things that you feel obliged to
So
communicate.
how would you, because I know a lot of leaders, and I know a lot of leaders who are more introverted and actually, as you describe, don't really want to get up there on the stage and haven't got, you know, I mean, I'm more extrovert, so I can be quite exuberant, but they may not have that more exuberant energy. How do you help someone who's got a more quiet, thoughtful, reflective energy get up there on the stage and shine?
You know, this is a really interesting, I've got an obsession at the moment that I'm convinced that kind of PowerPoint driven presentation, you know, was designed by men, bought by men, promoted by men. It feels like a very male oriented way of communicating.
Yeah.
And I've
Sends
got
everyone to sleep.
well, it can do, can't it? But
Yes.
I've got a female leader at the moment, and one of their organizational values is collaboration. She hates public speaking, hates it. So, you know, we're working out how she can have a series of connected conversations to communicate what matters. Sitting down, you know, literally modeling a kind of collaborative style of communicating by sitting with people and communicating rather than standing at the front with a slide deck behind her. So I think you have to find what feels right or comfortable. The staging really matters. If you're nervous on stage and your knees knocked together, how can we deliberately set it so that you're sitting or leaning or propping yourself in some way so that you can find that moment of being relaxed and at ease? Or maybe it's being interviewed on stage about what you're doing rather than standing there like a, you know, in the
having
spotlight.
To spout forth. Yeah. I love that, because to me that is really about playing to your strengths and aligning with who you are. So it really tunes into that whole thing around authentic leadership. And also, you know, that idea of that leader having smaller groups where she sat down in a more collaborative type conversation, that completely tunes into what's needed of leaders in today's volatile world, which is higher levels of collaboration.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, you know, we're not being creative enough. We're just going, oh, well, oh, you'll have to go out and make a presentation. Well, why? You know, maybe that's, you know, that 20 years ago, maybe that's what people wanted, but maybe people want to be involved in the conversation now rather than talked at, you know, so there's so many different ways of doing things. Maybe a live stream. Who knows? You know?
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
Get other people coming on. That'd be exciting, innovative.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Janie, we are coming to the end of our time today, which always goes so quickly. So, you know, we are out of lockdown in the UK. You're definitely out of lockdown, because I know you've been out seeing clients this morning, which is fantastic. But we're still obviously in this whole volatility and not really knowing what's around the corner. Who knows what's going to happen over the winter and all that sort of stuff. What's your final words of wisdom you'd like to share? Bearing in mind, you know, your focus is about listening and being there for people. What are your final parting words that you'd like to leave us with today?
Well, I mean, my absolute focus at the moment is, you know, don't talk at, talk with. I know that's not new. But I think actually we've been through such a period of learning new stuff, navigating technology, interacting differently. I would encourage everyone to have the cojones, you know, to go back to your roots, go back to connecting, go back to the simplicity of conversation, create the conditions for yourself to be able to listen fully to colleagues so that you can reconnect. Because I think this is going to be a funny old time of Zoom in real life. You know, we'll be in the office, but we'll be like that into our computers. So I just every day make the effort to connect, you know, with a more kindness, more generosity, more person to person, rather than just making it about getting stuff done. You know, don't come back to the office and paint it. Come back to the office and talk to each other about how things are.
I love that. Yeah, that's fabulous. So getting reconnected. And if people want to connect with you, how do they connect with you?
Oh, how lovely. Well, you can, I'm on LinkedIn, Janie van Hool, or you can buy my book from Amazon, The Listening Shift, or my website is voicepresence.co.uk.
Fabulous. Well, Janie, thank you so much. And just a final flash of your book, if anybody wants to get it, it is a great read. I've started it, haven't finished, but there's some great stuff in there already I can see, which I'm really enjoying. Thank you so much for today, Janie. It's been lovely having you here. And for those of you that have been tuning in, do write comments if you want to pop them in the comments box below, or if you're watching and catch up, again, please write your comments in or ask your questions. Always happy to respond to your comments as they come in. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm actually away next week. I'm on holiday. I'm off to Northumberland next week. So I'm going to be enjoying the wonderful beaches that are up in the northeast.
Oh my God,
but I'll be back on the 13th of August, where I will be joined by the amazing Ritu Kapoor, all the way from India. So we're going to have a hotline to India next on the 13th. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.
Bye.